Thank you.
Dr. Andrew Stricker is an instructional architect with the Air University, and he designs emerging learning technologies for Air Force education and professional learning. Prior to AU, he was the Associate Provost for Innovation Through Technology at Vanderbilt University. Andrew served for 27 years as an Air Force officer and scientist, specializing in learning sciences, technology systems integration, and human factors engineering. His graduate work was conducted at Texas A&M Texas A&M University and Yale University. Hello, and I'm Cynthia Calongne, better known as Lobo. I'm a professor with CTU Doctoral Studies and a computer science instructor for CCCS. Last year, I received the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education Thinker Award. And in 2010, Andy and I received the $25,000 grand prize for the Mars Expedition Simulation. I'm a published author and host of over 250 speaker sessions on virtual environments and games, as well as a virtual world design enthusiast who's attended over 700 classes. Let's begin. 2 days after the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education, here, let me go. I had to get a little closer to be able to click on the prim. My class met in Second Life here at the conference exhibit site. And let me pull that out for you guys. There we go. Whoops. Okay. We began in Second Life for the first few weeks while Andy was setting up the server in a farmhouse in Alabama called Virtual Harmony. That's what our world is called in our grid. And we looked through the exhibits, and then we moved to Virtual Harmony on OpenSim for their learning simulation projects. And the class were, at first, many of them, they had never been in a virtual world before. At this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to Zalomar to describe what was it like being a new student and starting in Second Life, moving to OpenSim, and then creating simulations. Over to you, Zalomar.
Hi. Yes, I intentionally said New Worlds in my title because there is more than one me and more than one world. In the beginning, it was very disoriented, and I like Dr. Calongne said, I had not been in virtual reality before. So understanding grids and moving between them was really interesting, really amazing. I equated it in my head to like a 3D internet, browsing the internet, but 3D. So William Gibson in his book, Burning Chrome, are a lot closer than I thought. So to learn about Second Life, I wandered. And I didn't really have a goal. I just wandered around to see what was there. So I would stumble across, for example, this picture here, a water park in the middle of nowhere. So instead of just looking at it, I pushed and poked and prodded it and found out I could sit on an inner tube and ride down a water slide. This is just no one around, no explanation. How cool is that? And you see that everything, all the physics will turn out great. So other sites where the objects are full of things to touch and wander through, like this pirate ship had doors you can go inside the cabins, and doors inside of that, inside the counters, and cabins inside of that. So always work inside of there, and the cannons you could fire off into the distance. So really playing with the world was very interesting. And the way I found these sites was just by wandering around. I didn't have a goal, didn't have anyone telling me what to do. I was traveling without any kind of a destination. And like surfing the internet. So sometimes when wandering around, I just find myself in a place that looks so cool, I just stop and look at the picture and go, I gotta capture this. So this is one of my first days in Second Life. This kind of image. Just absolutely surreal.
You know what's interesting about this is I didn't ask Zalomar to take all these photos, but he did. And of course he had no idea that a year later I would ask him to tell the story. That's what makes this very special.
Oh, yes, thank you. So to figure out how to make my own things for Dr. Calonne's class, I started looking more closely at what I was walking around and flying around. And I could click on things and focus on things, and it's hard to tell from that slide, but zoom in on it. I'm looking at some smoke coming out of a chimney. So even if I couldn't take it and copy it, I could still look at it and see how things that I was walking around were made, so I could figure out how to make my own things. And with Dr. Strichter's harmony, virtual harmony world, it was very, very helpful to be able to do all kinds of deconstruction in there, getting items that Dr. Calongne would get for us, and we take them apart and see how they worked. And this is the top of a burning 55-gallon drum, and I was looking at trying to figure out how they made the fire dance like that and how the smoke came out. And it really opened my eyes taking these things apart to be able to figure out how to make my own dynamic engaging effects using what volumes and motion and color and light. That's what you want to do in this world. So sometimes, like that fire, they showed me an effect how to make something look three-dimensional really easy. And that's all I needed sometimes. Like in this case, I made these flat images of piles of pig iron, which you'll see later in use. But I just made this really simple. This is the problem that would have taken me hundreds of objects to make otherwise, and I did it with 3 objects. Really simple, really effective.
Yeah, I have to tell on you, Brad. He came to me and he said, I want stacks of thousands of pig iron ingots. And I'm like, well, that's not going to be practical in a virtual world.
Yeah, so it was really great getting these tricks and learning how to do them, because I don't know what the limits are for the world. So then, having not seen all those different options and creativity other people have done, it allowed me to come up with tricks and trades and putting them together to make up what I really needed. What you're seeing here is part of my final solution of having a pile of pig iron over on the right and having this little worker guy who turned out to be called we nicknamed him Oompa Loompas, and he'd walk back and forth between the pile and the rail car, taking the pig irons to the rail car. And you see his hands are full one way and empty the other. Really simple, but it's moving by itself, really effective. And sometimes you just get whimsical and make something funny. So this green hat you see here became known as the pig iron hat. And I made it as a souvenir. Dr. Calongne said you should think about having a souvenir for coming to your site. And so I have these little things hanging down from the brim, little pigs and little irons. And they're things that couldn't exist in the real world, because as they spun around, there'd be a pig on one side, iron on the other side. And it was just a funny little joke, and that they swing around as you moved. So everybody's avatar fidgets when sitting there, and so these little pigs and irons would swing around. So this is the top-down view of my final solution of my problem in Dr. Calogne's class. My goal is to teach about Frederick Taylor and his principles of scientific management. Pretty dry topic, but I made it fun by making a kind of like a maze sort, where you walk along that brown line, and through that line, it would allow people to move through the rooms and give them the background they need to get the full bang of the final display. I made the room such a way that it really encouraged people to take the point of view of their avatars, and part of that, to look through their eyes, the avatar's eyes, to get the full experience of the multimedia presentation. And that got them more engaged to be in the environment, in the display, instead of looking down at it like you did, like you saw a second ago. So in the end, there was this dynamic diorama of things moving. Other ones were static or videos. And here are these little Oompa Loompas walking back and forth between those piles and the train cars. And people just got drawn to that. And so I encourage people to, again, look at it through the eyes of the avatar, not from this view, but down at the base where those 2 blue boxes are. And they'd see everything. All the cars would look like they're full cars, and all the piles look like piles, and the Oompa Loompas are moving back and forth. So trying to get the people immersed in the scene. And that led just to what I was hoping. People started walking into the scene, walking around, flying around, looking at it from different angles, and being engaged in it, and going, how's he doing that? What's that look like? How's that working? And here they are, they're being entertained, and the novelty of it brought them in. And in the process of doing so, here they are being exposed to Mr. Taylor and his scientific management. And of course, everybody enjoyed the hats. It was so funny listening to people talk to, ooh, watch what happens when I move my head. He goes, oh, wait, turn around again. Let's see the pigs fly around. And someone else comes in and says, where do I go to get my hat? And everybody loved them. It was great, and they really added a nice fun edge to the experience and made it memorable.
Thank you, Zalomar. And that was the reason I had suggested the hat is I had just collected 30 hats from the Fantasy Fair, right? And loved them. Well, here we're going to start thinking about what else is on Virtual Harmony. And in particular, I was struck by this story of the Dinosaur Adventure in OpenSim at Virtual Harmony. And this is on a different grid. And I'm going to kick off the story and then pass the floor to Andy Stricker, Spinoza Quinnell. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Jack, and he loved dinosaurs. That's delightful, Duango, myself, and Andy Stricker there. We meet on Sundays, and we work on research in these spaces. And Jack was thrilled. He asked his Uncle Andy what he could do in the virtual world to make dinosaurs come to life. And yes, he had a friend who's an Imagineer at Disney who made a dinosaur in his honor called the Jackosaurus, right? So we're standing here, and you'll notice I'm decomposing, right? And we're looking out over the water, and we're thinking about what Andy did over Christmas. And that's what was really amazing about this, is I was awestruck to see how fast over Christmas that he designed this space, right? And of course, I'm typing it while I'm talking here. So, and of course, Jack came during summer vacation and saw the virtual world, and we were all thinking about creativity, and I got to meet him, and then next thing I know, we have this wonderful new space, right? Well, we had some image resources. I'm going to kick off here just so you know what did Andy use to create this, and what are we using to create continuing content, or what could you use, right? And of course we have things like we have OpenSim. I'm going to feature a map of Dinosauria Park so you get a sense of which models we used. We have Andy did his models using 3D Cheetah 3D. But I do have instructions in case you would like to create a T-Rex using Blender, to make it easy for you to also be a creator. And now, Andy, I'm going to pass the floor to you.
Thank you. Yes, I've always just been fascinated with the benefits of these kinds of immersive 3D worlds for fostering creativity and capturing the imagination of people of all ages. And as Cynthia explained, when my 8-year-old nephew came to visit us, he had seen some of the work I was doing on these models, and he said, he told me the story about his experience at Disney World, how he had walked through some of the displays of the dinosaurs and pointed out amazing details about the various types and their names and the periods in which they're associated with, and as he was walking, he noticed that there was a dinosaur he couldn't quite place, and he pointed it out to his mom and dad, and so that later that evening he decided he was going to write a letter to Disney and asked them, where did this particular dinosaur come from? So he had a picture that he had taken, and so he sent the letter off, and a few weeks went by, and he got a response saying that Disney was so happy that he pointed out that dinosaur because, as it turned out, that dinosaur was an early prototype by the Imagineers, and it was entirely imaginative and didn't really, relate to any known dinosaur. But because he was so inquisitive, they decided to name that dinosaur after Jack, and they arranged for a ceremony at Disney World, and they put a plaque out there. If you go out there now, you'll see Jackosaurus. So that was part of where the spark got lit. And then when he came to visit me, he thought, well, how cool would it be if you could create your own dinosaur land and populate it with the kinds of dinosaurs you would want. And so we started working on that. And Jack, came up with this ideal of a cave that you would walk through to get into it. So, we put some rocks together and built a cave. And then, we put a little place where you'd come in, like a intro arena that would highlight each of the dinosaurs with note cards and information to sort of, be somewhat instructional. Jack is very precocious, and he loves to talk about these dinosaurs, and he's much more knowledgeable than I am about them, actually. And I just want to speak to this really funny experience I had. I put a laptop for Jack in my kitchen with a headset, and I went back to my office, and I connected in world to this dinosaur land with him. And, it was very amazing to me. Within a matter of a few minutes, he was navigating around and interacting in the 3D space. I was struck by that. And then he became very curious about, well, how, like Cynthia highlighted, how do you actually make them do something? And I explained the scripting behind the motions here in these 3D spaces. And before I knew it, within the hour, Jack and I were sitting down, walking through what it takes to actually, animate these dinosaurs. And he had such a playful spirit that he said, well, since this is all sort of what we create, why not make it where we can ride them? And so I said, okay, Jack, we'll put something together here, and that's how the T-Rex actually became somewhat domesticated out there in Jack's world, where you can actually ride one of the T-Rexes around. So but it's just really been a lot of fun working with an 8-year-old out in this kind of a space, and to see his creative energy just take off. He now lives in Florida, and he can get in to this Jack world, which he does on a regular basis by logging in and going out and keep adding to it and participating with it, and even using it for some of his science projects in school and reports and so forth. So it's, to me, that's if I had to say, that's been very, very personally rewarding to know that for the next generation they can start so young and quickly become so productive and what they can do with all this. There's no telling, maybe eventually he will become an Imagineer at Disney. I don't know.
That's great, Andy. Well, I'm going to cut in at this point just for a moment. And when I go touring around, you know me, I have to see the world from different viewpoints, right? So the last slide looked at it from a fine Scottish day, whereas now we're looking at sunset. I keep calling it Bangkok, but maybe it's Bangkok. And all of a sudden the world's rosy. There's a sunset, and I look over and there's 2 velociraptors. I just walked through them and I didn't notice them at first. But when I did, I was startled because, of course, there's sounds in this simulation. So and Jack's World uses the hypergrid. You don't like those? Well, it's not bad. Oh, you mean velociraptors? You don't like those dinosaurs? Well, of course not. They feed on whatever. They're carnivores, right? That's right.
Usually
But
have to advise visitors not to get too close to them.
and while this sits on a Mac server, Andy, using 32 gigabytes of RAM these days. By the way, we upgraded since OSCC, so we doubled our RAM. Do you want to talk about that for a moment, Andy?
We decided that we'd put everything on an old computer. We dug out of the closet and made it into basically our homegrown Linux server. And so everything we've done has been open source. And I guess, Cynthia, we've been at this now for, what, at least 6-7 years, maybe? And the grid has grown to represent a lot of our work in science, mathematics, education, you know, and technology areas. You know, it really is a great STEM collection of simulations. You know, almost everything we've done out there is highly interactive and tied to the storage of users' activities in databases. And so when you come out there, we often, you know, prototype, you know, what the art of the possible is when you create, you know, these kinds of immersive 3D learning experiences. And we've carried that work into our own professional activities with our institutions and students, as Cynthia's highlighted. And it's very collegial and collaborative. You know, recent graduates like Zalomar and others have, over the years, have been recurring visitors and participants. You know, we have these Sunday salon meetings in our French village, where we get together and we really have fascinating discussions about transdisciplinary and connections between what we do on the creative side with the history and philosophy and science of our disciplines. And I tell you, Cynthia, I don't know how you feel, but it's been very invigorating for me too to be part of those weekly meetings, you know, in the context of our own little private French village.
Thank you, Andy. So I have a little trivia question for you guys. I knew Buffy was going to be here, and she loves trivia. Can you name this dinosaur? Now, what's interesting about this dinosaur is it was discovered by an 8-year-old boy, and I want to say in 1996. So I didn't know what it was. I at first thought it was a triceratops, right? Any takers? And you don't have to if you're not up on it. But what I marveled at, and I'm sitting there writing it, right? It's the Zuniceratops. It's very similar to the Lyrantops, right? They're all kind of related. And Carol RB, that was a great guess. But no, we should have a Jackosaurus there, and that's going to be in a future model, right? But we were going for science, so we went... So we went for the Zuniceratops, and I was just struck by the fact that an 8-year-old found it, and in New Mexico, of all things. I live in Colorado Springs, right in Colorado, right above New Mexico, and of course we're always interested in dinosaurs and you know, in discovery, right? And then how long was the adult Brachiosaurus, generally speaking? You don't have to be precise here, but that's a long neck, isn't it? How long are we talking here? Does it remind you of any other animal, the Brachiosaurus? Yeah, it does remind us of the giraffe. And it's tempting to say 8 meters, but let's take a look. It was 85 to 98 feet long. That's amazing. And of course, I don't know about you guys, but when I grew up, the Brontosaurus was the dinosaur with the long neck, right? And then they changed his name. They said, no, it's the Apatosaurus. And then they said, now, do you know Scientific American? And of course, I don't have it right here, but Scientific American, I have a link in these slides, decided 2 years ago, so did scientists obviously, and they're just reporting it, but that the Brontosaurus is back, and that his neck was a little wider than the Apatosaurus. They had a little difference in the width of their necks. Okay, so we have these creation tools, and I want you to think about them because you could be the creator. It doesn't have to just be us creating things and you watching them. I don't know about you guys, but I love creating. And so I wanted to think about what do we need, what kinds of tools could we use to make some of this stuff. And I added DAZ 3D Studio because you want to be able to sit on them if you're going to write them, and you have to be able to create your cool poses, right? So Andy, talk a little about the Reser here. This is your text.
One of the things that we really like to do with a lot of the work over the years is put them in Resers, and so we can make the best use of the space and create a little bit of interesting effects. You know, when when you can res a dinosaur on demand, or we've got airplanes that you can res on demand, and all kinds of contraptions around virtual harmony, and so it helps to package too. You know, we can put together in packages things that relate to one another. And so when you go out and you res, you can bring up a set of things that are related. So it's a nice way to put a lot more into a space that can be somewhat discovered and surprising to the user.
Now this is how I see the world. For almost a year, I often in Second Life would go into wireframe mesh mode and study the world. And of course people would talk to me and say, doesn't my clothing look nice? Doesn't my avatar's skin look great? And this of course is what I was seeing, right? But I was fascinated looking inside and seeing how these guys were designed, their mesh, and what these tools are doing, and then what they look like once you have rendered them, and after texturing obviously and everything else. And there I am standing between them. The little pink box is the Reser object. The Kentrosaurus was new to me. I like him though. He's a great dinosaur. And of course I'm still fascinated with lighting. So you'll notice I've said Oriental Delight 1 because I love this. While the sky's not so attractive, I love how the dinosaurs pop and how I relate to them. We have some that are flying overhead as well, the pteranodons. And I know they're not considered classical dinosaurs, but I find them fascinating, their movement. So here's just a couple of slides from a site where you can build these models of the T-Rex, right? And they take it from a box, so it's as simple as a little box. Let me click ahead here. Yep. And of course, I gave a little talk about this to a student group who had never done any 3D modeling, right? Their idea of textures are clip art, and so I wanted them to think about how do your models come to life? What does this look like, the faces of it, and how do you break it apart? How do you use Blender to make this happen? Now, it's a low poly design. When you get done, it looks very nice, though. So I do recommend, I do have links for you. Remind me to put them in the chat. And then, of course, you know me. I have to see the world from different angles. I have to get between the dinosaur's legs and think about, what are we rendering? What's the mesh? What should we not render?
That is a great shot.
well, we're trying to think about performance. See, and I took enough Blender classes that I know that if we made a picnic table and we had a tablecloth on it, we wouldn't necessarily render all of the bottom side of the tablecloth. We'd only render the parts you see, right, when you bend over and look, okay, the visible faces. So I put my head inside some of their mouths. I went looking.
That was very brave of you, Cynthia.
I thought so. I really did. And of course I have a Bangkok sky behind me because I had to have something to inspire me while I was being so brave. And then I like to think about the habitat. I like to think about, the dinosaurs are going to the water hole, right? There's a reason they're here. I don't know where I am on the old speakeasy, so let me click it once. Maybe done. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. We're going to entertain questions at this point. I do have I do have a couple more slides, and one of them, by the way, here's the Brachiosaurus and a baby again. I jumped in the water to see if there were any Triassic models. We really didn't have very many from that period. They mostly come from the Jurassic and the Cretaceous periods. And then, of course, I have all these links for you, and I'm going to put a few in the chat log while you're letting me know if you have any questions. And of course, some of the images, most of them I created, in case you're wondering, but the ones that I didn't, I had links for as well. And then for this session, I've got that link. Here's the one for the cool dinosaur map. I love that one because it was 32 or 24-bit color PNG, so it was transparent, right? So I could put it over my slides and have it look good. There's that Scientific American article on the Brontosaurus's back, and I just love that because it's so disconcerting when the names of things change and you feel almost like you've gotten robbed as a kid, right? It's kind of like Pluto's no longer a planet. Who? What? the poor Brontosaurus. And then Christopher Columbus used to be a really good guy when I was little, right? And now, not everyone agrees. So there's some links in case you would like to model and design your own dinosaurs, right? And any questions or comments for us? Any questions for Zalomar on what it's like to study in these strange places and be a novice at it? Because he was not an expert at design when he not only designed his simulation, he had to research it, but he also created the scripts for the Oompa Loompas so they would march back and forth between the ingots and the railway cars taking loads of ingots, and just all these cool little moments, right? Well, Chloe, you see those last two links? You can indeed. And the question for the recording is, I wish I had that artistic ability. Most of us, I'm not an artist, Chloe, and I don't think Dr. Stricker began life that way, although he's certainly now very artistic. He paints and he does a variety of different types of arts. But I think these worlds inspire us to be better artists. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's like a 3D canvas. This gets back to what Zalomar was sharing earlier. It's a way that I think everybody has some level of artistic energy in them, and you find a niche, you find an area that you feel like you can start with, and sometimes you got to experiment and try things out in private because you don't want to put everything out there in the public forum initially, but others, as we've met over the years, their gift is in social interactions and engagement of people. Cynthia certainly has that very important social artistic talent. And so, usually when we talk with our students and our colleagues, we always reference that everybody has a way to contribute. And it's always better when everyone does. And not any one of us individually could do any of this to the same level without the collaborative and goodwill of our friends and colleagues.
I guess to add on that, when I was first trying to figure out how to make my displays involving this topic of pig irons, like Dr. Calongne said, I was asking her, can I have a pile of thousands of these things? And she just was going, what? And so I was playing with how could I make these things move and engage people. And so given this world, I was able to do things you would never be able to do in the real world. And that was having these ingots in the sky and then hold them in space, then drop them all, and then pick them all up and drop them again in different ways. And it was amazing the freedom I had to be able to play with the physics of what was happening when I couldn't do anything like this in reality. So experiencing and poking and prodding, you open your eyes up to all the possibilities, and it really gets the creative juices flowing. So just engaging in a world like this really makes it happen.
I think you bring up a key point, Zalomar, with the physics and the interactive nature of objects, with each other. There's like Nancy Nasserian, she's now at Harvard, used to be at Georgia Tech, but she'd often talked about model-based reasoning as a really fundamental skill set, right, where we could actually try out our understanding with models and see, if the expectation, accounts for what others would agree, and so, there's, in the realm of STEM, these kinds of immersive 3D worlds, can really help build our reasoning skills. And for young people like Jack, what a awesome way to get started with being able to test out your understandings and the representations of what you put together.
Thank you, Andy. And do we have any other comments? I had 49 slides, and I was sure I was going to run over time. So I was flipping like mad.
We can talk. We can talk fast, too.
Our Sunday session, our research, how some of this stuff comes together. Every Sunday, what Andy said, we hold this on the Loire region. And Andy, why don't you tell the story and I'll type it, okay?
Oh, sure. And years ago, when the Air Force came out in Second Life, we got invited to come out by a person whose name was Algernon Luor, and she it kind of introduced the possibilities with Leader Lobo, Cynthia, Calongne, and so the Air Force got multiple regions, and we started coming out, and just as a sort of a running joke that it still continues this day, everything we do initially, anything that's brand new, Algernon gets represented in it, and so of course, the Loire River runs through the Algernon fields, and that Monet painted in France. Seemed like a natural and fitting name for our little French village, and it's a very quaint little village that actually has very similar characteristics to the small villages that run in the vineyard regions that are spotted throughout the river areas as it moves from the west towards the southern eastern part of France. And so we have actually within the village where each of our regulars have a dwelling, and so we have a little community that's going on there. And then we come together on Sundays as a community in the salon and have our discussions.
I was just telling the story about one week he gives us little thought problems, and one week it was like, let's design our own wine labels. What would your vineyard look like, And it was just a silly little thing. We weren't really drinking wine, but we were just putting ourselves in a new mind space to think about the next project. And so we do these little exercises, not like a speed build, but like something we do, and then we show up and we show it off, and really rather fun. Now, I love speed builds too, don't get me wrong, but all these little creative moments that make life seem so much richer, right? Getting together with Barbara Truman, Delightful Duangle, and with quite a few others, quite a few of my graduates. Zalomar comes out every so often. We have several others who come out all the time, and well, like Barbara was one of my graduates also. So and who are now community leaders and continuing the research. So that's just absolutely wonderful. Now, earlier I gave a little talk and I made a comment, and Stranger whispered to me about it, and so I wanted to share it with this group. I said that if I do all the talking and you don't type in the text chat, how much will you remember 24 hours later? Does anyone know the number? How much will you remember? Just give me any number. You can make it up. You don't have to know. 24 hours later, if I do all the talking. Oh, see, Beth is so good. She's like, I got this down. 5%. Now, if you say the wrong number, you will remember even better. So one of my goals in life is to have students explore their wrongness. Explore your wrongness. I know that sounds weird, doesn't it? Because we always think about life being, I must always do right. That's like Mark Twain. Didn't he say, always do right. This will gratify some and astonish the rest. Okay, so if you discuss and you tell me numbers, even the wrong number, what percentage will you remember 24 hours later? Through discussion. Give me numbers. Well, Helena, that's a very high number. I would say it's lower. Lower, Marcus. Higher, Luke's. And good to see you. Carol got it. Carol got it. It's 50%. All of you who said the wrong number, you're going to remember so much better. You've explored your wrongness, right? And it causes a little discomfort because we like to be right, don't we? Like, oh, man, I'm not right. So nowadays, I'm all about my wrongness, okay? So now, those of you who said higher numbers, it's your turn. If we do a practice by doing, and we actually make something, or do a project, or which is why all my classes have projects, by the way, how much will we remember 24 hours later? Give me numbers. Make me feel good. Carol, oh, and Zoe. So it's so good to see you. Zoe and I have been in World together for so long, over 10 years, probably 12. The years just keep rolling, don't they? And Zoe was a doctoral student back then, Zalomar. Buffy and I are on the Nonprofit Commons board together. So there's pieces of each of you in the audience who are stuck to me. If you saw the real me, there's pieces of you all over my body. You know, it's kind of like right-clicking one of your folder names. Don't do this. And saying
I
add,
must be really
right?
stuck to you.
Yeah, I know. I got pieces all over. and I love that. Zinnia. I love that. Zinnia has me now thinking about color in new ways, Andy. And so... That's right. One day I accidentally said add. I right-clicked a folder, I said add, and there were like 30,000 items in there. That was not a good idea, you know, because next thing you know, I looked like something from a sci-fi movie, right? And of course, taking them off was not fun. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Joey. I have over 157,000 items, but so fortunately I only did it with one folder, but it was bad. I don't know if I took a picture of that. I have over 27,000 photos that I've taken in the virtual world. I haven't saved all of them. They're stuck in a little tool called Snagit that I use to curate and to organize it, so they're all saved by time, right? So I go to the year, I'll go, oh, I worked on such and such project in this year, that month, you know, and so then I just go there and I find all my work, right? Yep. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us. Those statistics I just gave you, I gave the link for it yesterday, so if you need that link, it was in some of our note cards from yesterday, and I can get that for you. But they're very interesting studies about learning retention and how do we up the number without testing people, without giving them test anxiety, and instead reinforcing a kind of learning that feels natural, right? That becomes a very personal journey. And do you know I have students that 2 years later remember what we've done. They may not remember all the mechanics of the interface, the software tool, but they'll remember how we did some of the things and why it mattered.
Yeah, I find that to
really
be true too. I mean, there's so many ways that these immersive 3D worlds offer cues with your memory, system that it's astounding to me just how vivid the memories are that can be when you have experiences out here.
I said I have all these images, but I haven't taken one of this group, and I didn't take one of most of the conference because at the same time I've had note cards up, I've had 20 IMs, different IM channels. I have 2 monitors going, I have all the slides, and so I kind of have a little cognitive overload going, right? And then when I try to do an image, the hover tips keep popping up, or one of the many HUDs I'm wearing. I'm wearing like 3 HUDs. So I'm feeling a little like HUD woman. But I am taking a quick photo of you guys while we talk, and I'm going to get one of the team here. Yep. And I am doing it by the normal environment, so I can see the world the way you see it, because that's important too. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. The next session will be starting and probably getting set up in about a minute. So I'm going to detach my HUD so they can do their part. I'll pick up my tech. And here's our closing image as we say goodbye to Virtual Harmony, to Jack's World, and thank you to my speakers, Zalomar, Brad Hodgins, Dr. Brad, and of course Dr. Andy Stricker, Spinoza Quinnell. Thanks, I'm Lear Lobo. Bye-bye.
Okay.